I did not plan to return. For years, I convinced myself that some places should remain sealed in memory, like letters never opened because you already know they will hurt. But life has a strange way of guiding you back to unfinished rooms. The orphanage stood at the edge of town, exactly where my childhood had paused without warning. I arrived just before sunset. The iron gate was half open, leaning slightly as if tired of holding itself upright. Rust had claimed most of its strength, yet it still made the same long, dragging sound when pushed. A sound that once meant dinner time, discipline, or bad news. Inside, silence lived differently than I remembered. Not empty, but watchful. Tall windows reflected the fading light, and the building's pale walls carried stains of rain, time, and forgotten voices. Grass had grown wild across the courtyard. The swing set near the entrance moved gently in the wind, creaking in slow rhythm like a tired breath. I stood there longer than necessary, not because I was afraid to go inside, but because some part of me feared recognition. As a child, I learned that places can remember you even when people do not. The front door was unlocked. The air inside carried a faint scent of old paper, damp wood, and something else I could not name. Not decay, not dust, something softer, like memory that refused to fade. My footsteps echoed through the entrance hall. I remembered running here once. I remembered laughter that sounded louder than it really was. I remembered counting tiles on the floor because counting was easier than feeling alone. Now every sound felt amplified. The brush of my coat, the quiet shift of air when I moved, even the small tremor of breath I tried to study. The corridor ahead stretched long and narrow, lined with closed doors. At the far end, moonlight slipped through a broken window, forming a pale path across the floor. It felt like an invitation, or a warning. I began walking slowly. Each door carried a number painted in fading black. Some hung slightly crooked, others sealed tight as if guarding something private. When I reached room 12, my hand paused on the handle. I had not thought about this room in years. I pushed gently. The door opened without resistance. Inside, the space was smaller than memory suggested. A metal bed frame, a wooden chair, and a narrow desk stood where they always had. The window overlooked the courtyard, its glass clouded but intact. I sat on the edge of the bed. A strange calm settled over me. Not comfort, not sorrow, recognition, as if the room had been waiting patiently, confident that one day I would return. I whispered something I had never said aloud before. I remember you. The words felt heavier than expected. Night arrived quickly. Without electricity, the building transformed into shadows and silver light. Moonbeams stretched across the floorboards, illuminating floating dust like quiet snowfall. I remained in room 12, listening. At first, there was only wind brushing against the outer walls. Then, something softer. A faint sound in the corridor. Footsteps. Not hurried, not loud, but deliberate, the measured pace of someone who knew exactly where they were going. My breath slowed. The sound stopped outside my door. I waited. Nothing happened. No knock, no voice, only silence, deep and complete. Yet the stillness did not feel empty. It felt shared. I stepped into the corridor. Moonlight revealed the long passage once more, pale and endless. No movement, no figure, no explanation. But something had changed. The air felt warmer, and for a brief moment, so brief I could have imagined it, I sensed what I had long forgotten. Not loneliness, presence. As midnight approached, I found myself sitting on the floor near the end of the corridor, back against the wall, knees drawn close. This had once been my hiding place when sleep refused to come. I closed my eyes. Memories arrived gently, not as pain, but as fragments of sound. Children whispering after lights out. Soft laughter. Someone humming a lullaby they barely remembered. And beneath it all, something deeper. A quiet promise that the building had never truly abandoned those who passed through it. Perhaps that was why I returned. not to uncover secrets, but to listen to what silence had protected. I am writing this by moonlight, using the notebook I brought with me. The orphanage does not feel haunted in the way stories describe. It feels unfinished, as if voices once interrupted are still waiting for someone to hear them completely. If I stay longer, I believe it will tell me why. And tonight, for the first time in many years, I am not afraid of the dark corridors, because something here remembers me, and I think I am ready to remember it too. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, but because the silence felt too meaningful to ignore. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, I realized something unsettling. The orphanage was not quiet in the way empty buildings are quiet. It was quiet the way people become quiet when they are listening. And I could not shake the feeling that it was listening to me. Morning arrived slowly. Gray light filtered through the broken windows, soft and hesitant, as if even daylight entered this place carefully. Dust hung in the air like suspended time. I walked through the corridor again, tracing the walls with my fingertips. The paint had peeled in long, curling strips. Beneath it, faint pencil marks covered the plaster. Lines, numbers, dates, and then names. Small, uneven handwriting, the kind children use when they are trying very hard to make something permanent. I found my own name among them, written low on the wall, near where a child might sit on the floor. I stared at it for a long time. I did not remember writing it, but I remembered wanting to be remembered. In the main hall, I discovered a locked cabinet I had never noticed before. Its glass panel was clouded with age, but shapes inside were visible. Folders, papers, thin notebooks stacked carefully. The lock was old, fragile. It opened with surprising ease. Inside were records, not official documents, but handwritten accounts. Pages filled with observations, schedules, notes about behavior, health, sleep patterns, emotions. Each child had a page. Each page was written by someone who had watched closely, quietly, patiently. There were no signatures, only dates, and something unusual repeated again and again at the bottom of many entries. Observed during silent hour. I frowned. I did not remember any silent hour. As afternoon approached, the wind outside grew stronger. It moved through broken frames and narrow cracks, creating long, low tones that echoed through the halls. At first, the sound resembled ordinary wind. Then it shifted, not louder, not clearer, but patterned, like breathing or whispering. I followed the sound down a staircase I had avoided earlier, a narrow set of steps leading below the main floor. The basement smelled of cold stone and damp air. My footsteps sounded heavier here, as if the building absorbed less sound the deeper one went. At the far end of the space stood a door slightly ajar. Behind it was a small room containing only chairs arranged in a circle. No desk, no shelves, no decorations, just chairs, facing inward. I stepped inside slowly. The air felt thicker, not suffocating, but dense with presence, the kind of stillness that exists in places where many conversations have occurred without ever being spoken aloud. On one wall hung a simple clock. Its hands had stopped at exactly 12 a.m. Midnight. I sat in one of the chairs. Without planning to, I closed my eyes. Memory surfaced, not as clear images, but sensations. Sitting in a circle, breathing together, listening to silence instead of filling it. And then a realization that made my chest tighten. We were not being disciplined, we were being taught. A memory returned in fragments, a caretaker's voice, gentle but firm. Some pain cannot be spoken immediately, but it can be witnessed. I opened my eyes abruptly. Witnessed. The word matched my sister's message. The orphanage had not simply housed children. It had created a space where emotions too heavy for words were shared through presence alone. Silent hour had been a practice, not punishment. Protection. As I stood to leave, I noticed something carved into the wood beneath one chair. The letters were small but deliberate. Not alone. I traced the carving with my fingers. A warmth spread slowly through me, not comfort exactly, but recognition, the same feeling I had experienced in the corridor at night. This place had not erased loneliness, it had held it, collectively. That evening, I returned to room 12 before sunset. The sky outside turned deep blue, then violet. The building settled into night once more. And again, just after midnight, I heard footsteps. This time I did not freeze. I stepped into the corridor. The sound moved slowly ahead of me, never hurried, never hidden. It led toward the basement staircase. My heart pounded, but not from fear, from anticipation. When I reached the circle of chairs, the room was empty, yet unmistakably occupied by presence. I sat again. The air shifted, and for the first time I understood the truth I had resisted since arriving. The orphanage was not remembering ghosts, it was remembering experiences. Every fear once shared in silence, every grief witnessed without words, every child who sat here believing they were alone, until they felt otherwise. What lingered was not people, it was connection. I whispered into the still room. I remember now. The wind softened. The clock above the wall ticked once, a single movement breaking years of stillness. 12:01. Time had begun again. Tonight I write with steady hands. The mystery is not frightening. It is gentle. This place did not trap memories. It preserved compassion. And something tells me the deeper truth is still waiting. Not hidden, not buried, simply patient. If I stay, I believe I will discover why this building called me back after all these years, and why my name was written not just on the wall, but somewhere much deeper. I stayed for 3 more nights, not because I needed proof, because I needed understanding. By then, fear had dissolved into something quieter, a steady awareness that the orphanage was not a place of abandonment, but a place where abandonment had once been met with presence. And yet, one question remained. Why had this place been forgotten? On the 4th evening, while sorting through the cabinet records again, I discovered a thin folder hidden behind the others. Its cover was blank, except for a single handwritten phrase: Transition Protocol. Inside were only a few pages, no official seal, no institutional markings, just careful handwriting, calm, deliberate, almost tender. The text described something unexpected. Years ago, the orphanage had been selected for a small experimental care program, one that focused not on discipline, performance, or behavioral correction, but emotional stabilization through shared presence. Children who arrived here often carried trauma too deep for immediate expression. Instead of forcing them to speak, caregivers created structured moments of silent witnessing, spaces where feelings could exist without explanation. No interrogation, no correction, no pressure to heal quickly, only presence. The goal was simple and radical: to ensure no child experienced pain completely alone. I read the pages twice, then a third time. At the bottom of the final page was a note written in a different hand, smaller, more personal. Closure of program approved. Insufficient measurable outcomes. My chest tightened. The program had ended not because it failed, but because its success could not be measured. Silence leaves no statistics. Presence produces no data. But the children had carried it forward, in memory, in instinct, in the quiet knowledge that someone once sat beside their pain without trying to control it. That night, I returned to the basement circle. The chair stood exactly as before, waiting without expectation. I sat in the same place and closed my eyes, and something inside me finally loosened. Not a memory, not a realization, but a release. For years, I had believed my childhood was defined by absence, by what I did not receive, by what was missing. But sitting there, breathing slowly in that shared stillness, another truth surfaced. I had not been healed here, but I had been held. And sometimes that is what makes healing possible later. The moment was interrupted by a faint sound behind me. Not footsteps, a voice. soft, gentle, almost indistinguishable from the movement of air. You came back. I did not turn immediately. The voice did not feel external. It felt remembered, like hearing words once spoken long ago and only now fully understood. I didn't know why. I whispered. You needed to remember you were never alone here. My eyes filled with tears I did not resist. Why did it call me back? I asked quietly. The answer arrived not as sound but as understanding, because witnessing creates responsibility, and responsibility, when carried gently, becomes compassion. When I opened my eyes, the room was empty, yet no longer mysterious. It was complete. The clock on the wall moved again. 12:02. Time was no longer frozen in this place. Neither was I. Before leaving the basement, I carved 2 words beneath the same chair where I had once found a message. I stayed. Not as proof, as gratitude. Morning came with soft sunlight filtering through the broken windows. The orphanage no longer felt suspended between past and present. It felt grounded, like any place that had fulfilled its purpose quietly and without recognition. I walked through each corridor one final time. The names on the wall no longer seemed like pleas to be remembered. They felt like acknowledgments of existence. Proof that presence had once been shared. Proof that silence had not meant abandonment. At the entrance, I paused and turned back. For years, I believed closure meant answers. Now I understood something deeper. Closure is not when a story ends. It is when its weight changes. I stepped outside into the morning air, carrying nothing visible, yet feeling lighter than I had in decades. The building stood behind me, unchanged. But it no longer felt like a place that held me. It felt like a place that released me. Tonight, I write this final entry from a small room in town. The orphanage did not give me new memories. It gave me new meaning for the ones I already had. I once believed I survived my childhood alone. Now I know I survived because, for brief and quiet moments, someone chose to sit beside my pain without asking it to be different. That is what the silence protected. Not secrets, not ghosts, but the simplest, most powerful truth a wounded heart can receive. You were never alone here, and you are not alone.